So hey y'all, hope I won't go on too long. But I want to talk about blockages and mental prisons. So a lot of times the way that you can get insight on what's going on is to basically look into what's going on around you. So for instance, right now, you got the government on lockdown, on shutdown, right? Whenever you're dealing with something that's shut down, right? Something that stops working, something that's blocked, it forces you to use your other senses. Your other senses. So, for instance, if you go blind, your other senses automatically become stronger. You're forced to have to use other senses that you won't normally use. Particularly when something so major is something that you heavily relied on no longer works. Start to shut down on you. Right? So we're in a time now that you really have to learn to start working your other senses. So what do you do? I had a friend that asked me, what do you do when you're trying to move forward? When you're stuck? When you're trying to heal yourself? What do you do? And a lot of times, true enough, it's easier said than done. But sometimes you definitely have to stop everything. You have to shut down. The shutdown is not a bad thing, y'all. Sometimes you have to learn how to sit back. You have to put everything in perspective. Everything that's going on with you, you have to stand back. Because we can look at the shutdown as a roadblock, or we can look at it as a place or a time of rest. You have to learn how to rest. And it's in your resting period that you will learn how to heal yourself. It's in standing still that you're able to deal with the things that you need to deal with, that you won't normally have to deal with when the world and everything around you is constantly moving. Because a lot of times we build these worlds in our head, these fantasies, these illusions. We create our own mental prisons. And the only way that you could truly break from of it sometimes is to be forced. Is for something to forcefully be shut down. And when something is shut down, you're forced to stay still. You're forced to reflect. You're forced to evaluate yourself and everything that's around you and people that's in your life. You're forced to do it. And either you can learn to stop and shut everything down, or either you will be forced to doing it. And when you're forced, it really don't feel so good. It don't feel good when you're forced to go through the dark night of the soul and see you and deal with things, because we create these fictions in these worlds, the ideal of things, the ideal of what we want, who we want, what's good for us, and what we think we need. So, this is definitely a time. There's a lot of stuff going on that people don't even understand why. Why is it that I feel stuck? Why is it that I can't move forward until you get to the other side of it and you be like, you know what? I wasn't stuck all along. It's an illusion. When in reality, I can just move. I can just walk whatever I'm in. The easiest way that I can explain and that I can help is to tell you, when you're dealing with being stagnant, when you're dealing with feeling like you're stuck, you have to face the fantasies, the illusions, whatever that your mind told you that you want versus reality. You have to come out of agreement with the prison and the fairy tale and the illusions that you have created for yourselves, the facades, the masking. Because the dangers in that is that you get confused and you get so wrapped up, so involved, that you lose yourself, and now you can't tell what's reality from what's fiction, what's real from what's fake, what have I created for myself versus what's real. Because if you're not careful, the mind will confuse you, and it will have you thinking that the world that you have created for yourself is real, and it's nothing nearly but an illusion. It's false. False evidence appearing real. It's not real. So how do you untwine from all the things that you have created? And some of us have created worlds for us for years, that your fiction and your fantasies start to look real. And now you're so confused because you would rather live in your fantasy than your reality, because it's safer almost for you to live in your fantasies versus your reality. But you have to deal with reality and stop running from the issues and the matters at heart, because that's how you get wrapped up into a fantasy in these false prisons that we have built for ourselves. When you learn how to deal with issues, problems, your fears, your doubts, whatever it is that's causing you to run from your reality, it's easier to deal with it. Because keep in mind, fantasies are not meant for you to stay in, because you will lose yourself if you stay in them too long. And we all know that sometimes you can lie so much, you'll start to believe them. And that's exactly what happens when you stay in a fantasy too long and you don't deal with your realities. How do you learn how to deal with your fears? You take them step by step. See, we run from our reality because we shy away from, or we fear dealing with hurt and pain, or whatever childhood issues that we might have occurred that we, don't want to deal with. So we slip into this fantasy and create this life in this world for us that seems safe. So when you start to deal with that pain, which, like I said, is not the easiest thing to deal with, but pain is meant to let you know that there's an issue at hand. It's a problem. Something needs to be healed. Something needs attention. But yet you ignore it. You choose to escape and not deal with it. So it's important that we actually see things for what they are. And if something is not working, if it don't feel good, that is pain. If it's not sitting right with you, it's meant to trigger you, so that you can bring focus and attention to an area so you can deal with it and not try to ignore it. Because when you go to ignoring it, then that's when you slip into this fantasy and you create this mental prison for yourself, so you won't have to deal with the pains, the fears, the things that you are afraid of, which some people call the boogeyman, which is simply an illusion, a monster. Something that's in your closet, your skeletons, that you choose to ignore because it's easier in your head to ignore things than it is to deal with things. So we let our ego, our pride, create these false illusions. Because at the end of the day, ego and pride is basically insecurities wrapped up in a personality that is wrapped up in a world which make it a mental prison for yourself, which insecurities are nothing but fears, things that you don't want to deal with. And we have to learn how to deal with things and stop shying away from our reality and escaping. Because like I said, fantasies are created to escape from reality. And reality is for you to live in. Fantasies are escapes. They are not built to last. Because whatever you build in this fantasy, it will not last. It will come down. It will come crashing down on you. It's like the Matrix. You have to be careful. Because you may or may not make it out. That's just how deep it is when it comes to when we get so wrapped up in we don't want to deal with life and what's going on. So stuff end up backfiring on us or blowing up in our face when we choose to not deal with things out of fear or out of our insecurities. And when you operate in fear, or you operate in insecurity, nothing good comes from it. So the same life you're trying to build is the same life that you're really destroying, okay? It's almost like the three little pigs. When you build a life surrounded by insecurities and fear, and you build this fantasy world because you know deep down that something you're not fulfilled, or you know that you're not happy. The opposite from being happy is being hurt. So in reality, you're hurt. So like I said earlier, when you're hurting, that's the body's way of telling you that something is wrong, something is imbalanced. You have to deal with it. And if you don't deal with it, you can risk an infection. Not only that, you can risk not only a illness of or gangrene or whatever, you can risk dying, death. And what you don't want to do is die in the fantasy. Get trapped in fantasy because you will never come back out of it. And that's how you can see people start to lose themselves when they play certain roles, masking the facades people put on. Even the actors, they play things so deeply and play certain roles they can't even get out of them. So you have to be careful what worlds you decide to play in, what worlds you decide to build a life in. Because you will mess around and get trapped. And you'll mess around and die in the same world that you thought brought you happiness. Or you thought that was fulfilling, when part of you, deep down, you know that it's not real. And that's why at the end of the day, no matter how far you try to mask things, or you try to put on a facade, or you try to hide things, you can't hide. Some things will never go away. So, with this being said, we have to learn how to deal with our hurts and our pains. You have to give attention to that. You have to come out of denial, and you have to deal with your hurts and whatever you have going on. Because you're trying to build a world out of straw and sticks. And I promise you, it will come down. And you may or may not get out of that house when it falls apart. So, you learn to deal with your realities and whatever coping mechanisms, whatever escapes, whatever vices that you have, so you can continue to cope with the fantasy of the false world, or the false prison, mental prison that you have built for yourself. You gotta let it go. Because even after a while, those vices and those coping mechanisms that you got, whether it's eating, drinking, smoking, dope, whatever, it don't even matter. Whatever you got, the sexing, sleeping around, whatever you got, at some point it's going to stop working for you. So you're going to have to face those demons, whatever they look like. So when you learn to face them, deal with them, then that's when your mental prison, or everything around you, day by day as you deal with them, you start to see that it wasn't a prison after all. That this was merely an illusion that I created for myself. And the more you run, the more time you waste. So you deal with your demons, you acknowledge them, and you take them on until you deal with every demon, every issue, every problem, until you knock down whatever mental prison, whatever false world, whatever fantasy you have created for yourself. Y'all be good.